Good morning. So today what I'm doing is I'm just casting a critical eye over my borders, and I do this throughout the summer as the garden sort of develops. And what I'm looking for are plants that I love but that are underperforming, and then I'll try and work out why they're underperforming and what I'm going to do with them. So I've had a chance to think about it because I've just been having a little look around the borders, and I think it was in March or April this year. It wasn't too long after I started the channel, and I was in the garden waxing lyrical about how beautiful New Zealand satinflower is and that it's one of my favourite plants, second only to foxgloves. And I'm going to show you what they look like now. I had high hopes for them, and you must be looking at them and think, well, that's a bit pants. But this is a good example of a New Zealand satinflower. Isn't that beautiful? They're like sort of a mini orchid, and they come out of this, we always refer to it as spiky guy, these sort of strappy green leaves. The first spiky guy that we got was back in 2000, the millennium year, and my daughter had been to a car boot sale and she came home with a little pot. It had no label on it or anything, and it was about this big, and someone had just sort of cut along the top of it. Anyway, we put it in a pot and we put it at the front of the garage, and it lived there until 2008 when we moved into this house and we created the borders, because this was all laid to lawn. There was no flowers in whatsoever, just the trees. And the first New Zealand satinflower that I planted was here. Put him in there and he just took off, and then we discovered that he actually flowered, and we got these beautiful flowers. So every clump of New Zealand satinflower in the garden is a result of splitting that original plant. And what I find is that I get about 5 years out of the plant before it stops producing. So that is quite a young plant. I would say that's about 2 years old over there, the one you've just seen. This one here, if you can have a look, he's got all the flowers on the left hand side and then nothing over on that right hand side there. So that's not good. And then if you look at that back one there, there isn't a single flower on this year, and he's looking very sorry for himself. So what happens is if you're a gardener, I'm sorry, you already know this, but when you've got clumps of herbaceous perennials like delphinium or lupins or New Zealand satinflower, they will sort of die. They sort of go donut shaped, so the flowers go around the outside and you get a clump of dead in the middle, and then they just stop flowering altogether, and basically they just sort of get too old and they take all the nutrition out of your soil and they starve. So the only thing to do with these, I know, is to dig them out and replant in that space with a new piece of New Zealand satinflower. And you can take a bit off the edge, or you can get an actual new plant. And I know in the little woodland area there at the bottom, there are loads of young plants. But if you have a look at the border again there, there's no way I can climb into these borders and dig out these huge clumps of New Zealand satinflower without wreaking havoc in the borders. I would just cause too much damage. So what I do is I have a to-do list in my journal, my gardening journal, for the autumn, and I'll just write in dig out New Zealand satin flowers and replant. And then I've actually got from, say, October to about, I would say, February, March to do that. So I'll try and find some stills of the satin flowers when they were absolutely beautiful. And I'd wished I'd had my channel going last year, because there were just pops of white all over. This is another huge clump. If you look at the circumference of that satin flower there, and then I've got 2 flowers on it. But if you come here, Jess, and you just look into that little woodland area there, can you see all the pops of white? And then the very low spikes, they are the new baby satin flowers. This is another quite young one. I know he's 2 years old, and look at all the flowers on that. And then on my front border, I planted one last year, and he just took off, and I counted the heads. I had 25 flower heads on him. So that's how they should perform. So that is going in my journal. This is another newish one here, you see. Right, so it was funny because I was looking through my garden journal, and it was January 2019, and it said, "Have had a lovely morning. I've dug out a New Zealand satin flower." And then I'd come in at about 1 o'clock, and I said, I lit the fire, put Columbo on, and immediately fell asleep. It's very hard work digging these plants out. Right, the other thing that has been really disappointing this year are these ice plants. And these, I would say these have been in for about 6 years. I've got a clump there, and I've got a clump there. And when I was taking the bluebells out the other day, if you come round here, Jess, so this is an ice plant. It'll grow lovely and bushy and rigid, and then it gets, in the autumn, it gets a lovely big red flower on. And what I noticed, if you can look in here, look at that. Now that just should not look like that. If you come with me now to the front border, I'll show you what a healthy ice plant should look like. Just a little detour on the way to the ice plant. I've just noticed that my very tall Sweet William that I grew from seed last year, they're all coming up in amongst the Linaria, so I'm very pleased with that. So this is what a healthy ice plant should look like. Very upright, nice sort of pistachio coloured dark leaves, and these are all the flowers that they'll be in flower about August, September, and they'll stay in flower right through the winter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take cuttings off this ice plant, and then we'll go back in the back. So yes, I'll just show you again the unhealthy ones. Basically, these clumps have just, they're spent, they've had their life. I'm going to dig these ones out now, because what I don't want is, you come up the drive, I don't want to be presented with this. And I'm not sad, because like I say, I'll take the cuttings, I'll put them in the greenhouse, I'll plant something else here this year. Maybe some of the orange geum out the back garden, or flock, something like that, something gorgeous. It's just another excuse to go to the garden centre. This is a lovely wild geranium, a true geranium that gets a lovely purple gentian flower. And the thing is, with any size garden really, I always think that a plant has to earn its keep. It has to provide something beautiful to look at. For me personally, something, some pollen for the bees, and just these big clumps of New Zealand satinflower that I've been showing you, you know, huge expanse of earth they're taking up for very little benefit to anybody, certainly not to me, and certainly, you know, a clump like that, it's the bees aren't getting anything out of that. The snails love it, but what I have decided to do when I dig that clump out is, you can see how I overstuff my borders. So if you look in here, put my foot in here. This is a red peony with that leaf, but this plant here is, can you see it there? That is Hydrangea Annabelle, and my husband bought that for me at Edinburgh Botanical Gardens last year. And that kind of hydrangea, you can cut it right down close to the earth in the autumn, and then he grows in 1 year and he gets huge white heads of flower. But you can see, you know, I've put him in that spot. He's crowded out by the peony, and then behind him he's got Veranocastum alba. Behind that we've got some lovely lilies. You know, he's got no space to grow. So what I'll do is I'll dig him out in the autumn, and I'm going to put him there, and then he's going to have loads of room, and he'll look he'll have a lovely backdrop against that sort of coppery coloured shrub there. So I have got something in mind to go in that spot. I think I've said before, my garden's very shady, and I love the white pops of New Zealand satinflower. So I will be just digging out loads of baby ones and planting them there. Because if you can imagine, if this had 3 times as many white flowers there, that's what he normally looks like. So yeah, I'm not going to be disappointed. I'm just going to look at it as an opportunity. So that's it. Just do keep an, oh, I'll show you one other big clump of New Zealand flower in there. Can you just see behind the peony, that huge clump there, and it's got 1 flower on it. So yeah, I can just put that out my mind now. It's going to go in my diary, and I'll sort it in the autumn, and I'll sort the ice plant this weekend. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.